Hey everybody, my name is Philip. Earlier this year I started to read the Bible from front to back all the way through, and I really just wanted to share a video journal of what I'm reading, what I'm learning, so that I can share that with you all. Really the intention for me is to just learn more about the character of God and see what lessons that He might have for me that I can live out today. So I hope these videos are beneficial to you in some way, and I hope you enjoy them. Welcome back. We are in 2 Kings chapter 11 today, and this tells the story about a scorned mother, another evil queen. See, you thought Disney was the author of evil queen villains, but actually, it was the Bible. It was God. Chapter 11, it tells the story about an evil queen villain named Athaliah. By the way, chapter 11 also is chock full of names that are very difficult to pronounce, so please bear with me there. I'm probably going to mispronounce them. I'm sorry. What do you want me to do? I'm going to do my best. Here we go. Let me summarize this for you. So at the beginning of chapter 11, we meet Athaliah. She's the queen who was the mother to King Ahaziah, the guy that was killed by Jehu, in chapter 9. Queen Athaliah sees a chance to seize power, but in her ambition, she turns to wickedness. When she learned that her son was dead, she arose and destroyed the royal family. So here it is in verse 1. When Athaliah, the mother of King Ahaziah of Judah, learned that her son was dead, she began to destroy the rest of the royal family. Yikes! She doesn't want rivals, even if it means killing her own grandchildren. She wants to be queen. She wants the power for herself. But guess what? God had a plan. Won't He do it? All right. So in verse 2, we see Ahaziah, the dead king's sister. Her name is Jehosheba. I know. Jehosheba. Jehosheba is the sister of King Ahaziah who had died, and she is the wife of a high priest named Jehoiada. Jehosheba. She couldn't stand by and watch this evil just happen and take place. So what does she do? In verse 2 it says she took Ahaziah's infant Joash and stole him away from among the rest of the king's children who were about to be killed. She put Joash and his nurse in a bedroom, and they hid him from Athaliah, the queen. So the child was not murdered. So Jehosheba, with the help of her husband the high priest, Jehoiada, hides Joash, the child, in the temple of the Lord, and there he remained with her for 6 years, hidden in the house of the Lord, while Queen Athaliah was reigning over the land and bringing evil and terror across the land. So this continued for 6 long years. Queen Athaliah ruled Judah with no idea that the true king, Joash, just a kid, was alive and growing every day. But, in verse 4, in the 7th year of Athaliah's reign, Jehoiada the high priest summoned the commanders, the Karaite mercenaries, and the palace guards to come to the temple of the Lord. He made a solemn pact with them and made them swear an oath of loyalty there in the Lord's temple. Then he showed them the king's son. So he gathers all the captains of the guard, he makes them make a covenant, and he reveals Joash as the true king. Jehoiada gives instructions to these commanders, and he says in verse 5, this is what you got to do. 1/3 of you are going to be on duty on the Sabbath. You're going to be the guards to the royal palace itself. Another 1/3 of you are to stand guard at the Sur gate, and the final 1/3 must stand guard behind the palace guard. These 3 groups will all guard the palace. The other 2 units who are off duty on the Sabbath must stand guard for the king at the Lord's temple. So he's given them instructions. Basically, here's what we've got to do to protect Joash as we reveal him as the true king. So, in verse 12, Jehoiada, the high priest, he brings out Joash, the king's son. He places a crown on his head and presents him with a copy of God's laws. They anoint him and they proclaim him king. Everybody claps their hands and shouts, "Long live the king! Long live the king!" So the sounds of celebration echoed through Jerusalem. Queen Athaliah, she heard this noise. She rushes over to the temple to see what is all this commotion about. She gets to the temple. She sees the boy Joash, the guy that she thought was dead. She sees him standing by the pillar, wearing a crown, surrounded by guards, and rejoicing people everywhere. In verse 14, it says that she saw all of this. She tore her clothes in despair and shouted, "Treason! This is treason! Give me just a treason." No, okay, I'm sorry. So the high priest, Jehoiada, orders her to be captured. In verse 15, it says, "Take her to the soldiers in front of the temple and kill anyone who tries to rescue her. She must not be killed in the temple of the Lord." So they seized her and led her out to the gate where horses enter the palace grounds, and she was killed there. Just like that, Queen Athaliah's reign of terror had come to an end. So then the high priest Jehoiada, he made a covenant between the Lord and the king and the people that they would promise to be the Lord's people. So the temple of Baal was destroyed, its altars were torn down, its priests were killed before the altars, the people rejoiced, the land was at peace, and Joash was 7 years old. Can you imagine being 7 years old and you're just like looking around, you got this crown that's probably 3 times too big on your head, and you're just like, what is happening right now? I think I'm the king. So this chapter is really cool for a lot of different reasons. And I'm going to try to articulate those as best I can. I think in our lives, oftentimes there's moments where we might think darkness has won or evil has prospered and everything feels lost. And in this chapter, I believe certainly the people felt that way when Queen Athaliah had seized the throne for herself, and she tried to wipe out the entire line of David. They might have even believed that she succeeded in doing so. They may have said God's promise to his people is broken. But little did they all know that hidden in this temple was the child Joash, preserved by God for a purpose. So the first thing that I saw here is even when all seems lost, God always preserves a remnant. When we see evil triumphing around us, God is never without a plan. When Queen Athaliah had tried to destroy every means of godly leadership, God already had a plan or a way to escape. Joash wasn't simply a survivor, he was part of God's divine strategy. I think times in our life we might feel overlooked, we might feel forgotten, we might feel stuck. But what if God is just preserving us and not punishing us? What if, like Joash, our quiet seasons might be just a time of preparation for a greater purpose? Interesting perspective, and I think sometimes we have to adjust our perspective. The second thing was cool is I thought it was really cool that they hid Joash in the temple of the Lord. I think this is kind of symbolic for the temple as being a place of preservation. The palace where a king would normally be staying was a dangerous place in this time, but the house of God was his refuge. And I think for us, when the world feels unsafe or unstable, which it often does, our call is to get into the presence of God. I think it's in worship, prayer, and community that God hides, heals, and prepares his people. There's a lot of times where I don't feel strong enough to fight a particular battle, but in God's presence, I need to stop and say, God is shaping me for the right moment. And that right moment will come. Joash wasn't revealed to be the king until the appointed time, not too soon, not too late. The high priest didn't act out of impulse, but he waited for God's perfect timing, gathering the right people and making sure the foundation of things were in place. So the reminder that I have for myself is that God's timing is perfect. God's timing oftentimes isn't the same as my timing. I want answers now, now, now. But God's timing is perfect. What God starts in hiding, he'll reveal in power when the time is right. So I think for you and for me, the calling, the purpose, the breakthrough, it's not lost. It's just waiting for the moment when God says, now. And I think the other lesson that we've mentioned before in other videos, we've talked about before in other videos, is that God always keeps his promises. Little Joash's survival wasn't about him, it was about the promise God had made to David that his line would never end. So the people may have lost hope. Some of the people maybe even forgot this promise that God had made, but God did not forget his promise. And I think this chapter shows us that God's promises are stronger than any of the enemy's plans. When God promises you something for your family, for your life, for your future, we need to trust that God will bring that to pass. We can trust Him even in those seasons of silence. So the story here of Joash, I think it reminds us that God preserves what the enemy tries to destroy. When we're hidden, we're not forsaken. When the world says we're done, God is just getting started. So don't fear the evil. Don't fear the darkness. Don't underestimate the quiet seasons in your life. You might be just like Joash, preserved for a purpose and placed by God for a moment that only He can reveal in His perfect timing. Won't He do it?